I felt loved and I felt accepted in my family. My dad used to tell me things like, "You're my miracle baby." When I look back on it now, I can see some things that made it clear that there was more to this story that I didn't know about. I was born in Little Rock, Arkansas, into a really loving Christian family. I'm the oldest of 3 girls. I have 2 younger sisters. In high school, I got really interested in broadcast journalism. I decided to major in broadcast news, and my goal was to be a television news reporter. Toward the end of my senior year, I just felt him calling me into full-time ministry, and I didn't know what that meant. I moved back home, and I decided to be a student ministry intern at my home church. So that summer, I was living with my parents. I remember coming home from a youth trip, and I was unpacking. My mom came into my room. She had this expression on her face that I couldn't quite read, and her eyes started to fill with tears. I remember her saying, "I never meant to keep this from you. I've always meant to tell you this story, but there never seemed to be a good time." My mind flooded with all these different horrible things that she was about to say. She started to tell me that, your dad and I have always been really honest with you, that when we got pregnant with you, I was a freshman in college, your dad was a senior, we were young, we were dating, we weren't married, and that you were born 13 weeks premature. But what you didn't know was all of the circumstances that led up to your premature birth. And she told me that when she found out she was pregnant, she decided that she wanted to have an abortion. She proceeded to tell me the story behind, what had led up to everything. Obviously, it was all a shock. I had no idea. I think in that moment, it was almost like God allowed me to see my mom and who she was. It gave me a lot of compassion for her and what she had been through and the depth behind the decisions that she had made. At the end of our conversation, I remember her saying, "I don't really know why I'm telling you this right now." I knew in that moment that God had a purpose and a plan for me that was far bigger than I even understood at the time. That Wednesday night was actually the first time that I shared it. That began this journey of me sharing. When I was pregnant with my first son, for the very first time, it started to hit me, the reality and the magnitude of the situation that my mom went through. If I were in her shoes, or if the situation would have been reversed, how would I have felt walking through all of this alone and scared, feeling not ready because she wasn't ready? And that really hit me hard. I obviously shared it really early on, within days of finding out. I left home a year or 2 after that and moved out on my own and bought a house, and I was working in ministry. I actually shared it quite a bit with students and with adults and just in the churches that I worked at. So people would ask me questions and I didn't really know all the answers. And so I started to kind of bring it up along the way. And a lot of times I would talk to my dad about it when my mom wasn't around, because I knew that it was a really hard subject for my mom, and my dad was a little more willing to talk about it. I felt like I was protecting her by not talking to her about it. The last thing I wanted was to cause her more hurt, because I knew she had already been through so much. So I just prayed and I waited on God's timing. It was hard for her to talk about it. It was hard for her to go back there, especially with the people who saw her one way and didn't know about her past. In January of 2020, I was scrolling through social media. I came across a news article that I clicked on. It had a quote from a lady named Melissa Ohden, founder of the Abortion Survivors Network. So I clicked on the link to the website and I read everything on the entire website. I started thinking, wow, there are other abortion survivors out there. And that kind of began the journey of me walking towards sharing my story more. The more I talked to Melissa, the more I felt empowered to share more. And I'm so fortunate that I've had a loving relationship with my parents and that my story went the way that it did, that there was a happy ending in the midst of all the things that my parents had gone through. A lot of survivors can't say that. I realized that I was called to be a voice for them and for the millions of babies who can't be a voice for themselves. My dad was young, he was naive, he was immature, and so there are some things that he probably did wrong along the way. But on the other side of things, my dad was a godly man who stepped up and owned his decisions and was willing to go to bat for me. My mom is so brave and so courageous for sharing that part of her life. We all make mistakes. We all go through hard things. We all do things that we regret. Walking this journey with my mom has really shown me that the church should be a loving and welcoming place where people like my mom can come in and be received in love and find hope and find healing. And it takes courage, it takes strength, it takes grace and love. And when you feel judged because of your past, then that's the last place you want to run to, and the church should be the first place that you want to go. I'm so proud of her. I know it's been a long and hard road for her. I want her to be whole. I want her to know how loved and how treasured and how cherished she is. I don't want her to live in pain or shame or guilt. Your story is your story. Hiding it is causing you more suffering. When things are in darkness and hidden away, there's more trauma and more shame and more hurt that is created. When the truth is revealed and brought into the light, there's power in sharing the truth. There's power in sharing a real story. There's so many people who are impacted by hearing someone else's story. You're seen, you're loved, you're valued, you matter, your story matters, and so do you.